Have you always wanted to play as a space dragon that can nuke enemies, a ball of arcane energy that can fire across the map, an 8-year-old girl with a teddy bear? If so, mages are the class for you. Whether you're trying to figure out what to buy, or why the enemy Zoe keeps turning your screen gray, I'm here to explain what every mage item does, and when you should buy it. I'll start with legendary items, but make sure to stick around for the very important mythic items. The first mage item is Banshee's Veil. This is a magic resist defense item that grants a spell shield, blocking the first enemy ability that hits you. The spell shield is really nice for blocking stuns and reducing the chance that the enemy can kill you quickly. The item becomes risky to buy against champions with a lot of spammable, long-range attacks. If the enemy has a champion like Victor or Xerath, they will be putting your shield on a long cooldown without it doing anything useful. It is the only mage item with magic resist though, so if the enemy is very heavy on magic damage, it is usually still worth it to buy. The next item is Rylai's Crystal Scepter. Most mage items provide a lot of ability power and some ability haste, but Rylai's trades the high damage for giving you extra HP and a passive that causes your abilities to slow enemies. The perfect champion for this item is someone like Aurelion Sol. There are a lot of situations where Aurelion Sol wants to chase enemies, and his wide abilities mean he can consistently apply the slow in fights. His abilities for most of the game are consistent damage, which means having the extra HP keeps him alive long enough to keep using them. If the champion you are playing fits any of these categories during the game, this is a great choice. The next item is a very simple one for all you tank haters. Void Staff provides a little ability power and 40% magic penetration. If the enemy team has a lot of tanks, or is generally stacking a lot of items that give them magic resist, it may become necessary to buy this item to keep doing damage. This isn't an item you need to buy every game, so make sure you check the enemy's items for magic resist before deciding to buy it. Archangel's Staff is an item for mana-hungry champions. Its passive grants you ability power equal to 1% of your maximum mana. It provides you with 500 mana when bought, and every time you hit an ability, you gain an additional 3 mana, or 6 if you hit a champion. The bonus mana caps at 360 mana, at which point it evolves into Seraph's Embrace. This causes your bonus ability power to increase to 2.5% of your maximum mana, and grants you a new passive that gives you a shield when you go below 30% HP. The size of your shield scales off of your current mana at the time. Horizon Focus is a damage-focused item for long-range champions or ones with lots of CC. Hitting an enemy at over 700 units or immobilizing or stunning them causes you to do 10% more damage to them for 6 seconds. For reference, 700 units is slightly longer than Caitlyn's auto attack range, which is 650. This item is pure damage, and is great on champions that hit from far away, like Zoe or Vel'Koz, but can also be very useful on someone like Annie or Nico, who has CC as part of their burst combo. In a lot of instances, Shadow Flame, another high damage item, can be a lot more effective of a purchase. Shadow Flame gives you 10 to 20 magic penetration, depending on the enemy's current health. The amount increases the lower their health, maxing out at 1000 or less HP. Alternatively, if the enemy was recently shielded, you gain the full 20 penetration no matter what. Whether you should buy this item really comes down to how often you can get the full value out of it. If the enemy has a lot of magic resist, you are probably better off building Void Staff to get the percentage penetration. If the enemy has a lot of shields, or a generally squishy low max HP team comp, this is probably your best damage option. Cosmic Drive is an item that is all about speed. Having Cosmic Drive will increase the speed at which you can spam abilities by giving you reduced cooldowns. It also increases your movement speed by 5% flat and through its passive. Hitting an enemy with Cosmic causes it to generate a stack of 2.5% movement speed every 1.5 seconds over 5 seconds, up to 10% movement speed. Once you reach 4 stacks, you will gain an additional 10% movement speed. Dealing damage refreshes the effect. The item is good for champions like Gwen or Vlad, who want to move around quickly inside of a fight and are consistently dealing damage. Long-range champions or burst champions like Xerath, Annie, Vel'Koz, or Zoe might benefit from the ability haste, but aside from using it as a way to run away, the movement speed they are able to get is not going to be as effective as other passives. Morellonomicon is the only mage item that causes your abilities to apply grievous wounds, reducing the enemy's healing by 40% for a few seconds. A recent change made to Grievous Wounds made it so that the component item Oblivion Orb grants the full 40% reduction without being built into Morello's. The main point of building Morellos is to get the healing cut, so if that is all you need, it can be more efficient to only buy the component and work on other items instead of finishing Morellos. Oblivion is a steep 800 gold investment, so you should make sure you know when it is appropriate to buy, rather than buying it blindly. If the enemy team has a lot of healing, but you are playing a champion that cannot apply it very well to multiple people, or when the healing is occurring, it is often better to politely ask one of your teammates to build anti-heal instead of building it yourself. They might respond with racial slurs instead, but at least you tried. Zanya's Hourglass is the armor equivalent to Banshee's Veil. Hourglass is the only mage item that provides armor, but it also has one of the most hated passives in the game. Activating Zanya's puts you in a stasis, making you untargetable and invulnerable for 2.5 seconds. You are also stuck in place and can't do anything. There are a couple of uses for Zanya's that we can go over. The first is when you are playing a champion that initiates a fight and draws a lot of enemy attention. Something like AP Malphite or Swain is often in the position where they're inside of a group of enemies. Using Zanya's after initiating with one of these champions gives your team time to follow up on your assault, spreading out the enemy's attention so they are not all focused on you. Another use for Zanya's is preventing your death. If you're low on HP and an enemy uses an attack that you wouldn't be able to dodge, using Zanya's gives you time to receive aid or put their spells back on cooldown. Something to note is that Zanya's cancels attacks from turrets mid-air, and causes them to stop targeting you. If you get out of a turret's range, you can use Zanya's to cancel its last attack and walk free. Even if you are still in the turret's range when you go into stasis, an ally or minion can start taking the turret aggro before you leave the stasis to let you out safely. The last use for Zanya's is to buy time for your cooldowns. While in the stasis, your cooldowns continue to tick. If you're playing a champion such as Fizz, using the stasis can give you enough time to get a defensive spell back, allowing you to escape or combo the enemy another time. Lichbane is an item for champions that weave auto attacks into their combos. After casting an ability, your next auto attack gains an additional 75% base attack damage and 50% of your ability power. This item is great for champions like Fizz, Twisted Fate, and Echo, who all have an ability that already enhances their auto attacks. This is a great damage item for champions that can utilize the passive efficiently, but it is not viable on many champions. For mages such as Annie or Reliansul, who have slow auto attacks, low base attack damage, and do not typically use autos as part of their combos, this item should not even be considered. Demonic Embrace is an item for all the beefy mages out there, or even some tank champions. Demonic Embrace gives you 2% of your bonus health as ability power. It also causes your abilities to burn the enemy for 1% of their maximum HP every second over 4 seconds. If you're a melee champion, that increases to 1.6%. The base stat of the item also gives you 350 HP, which is not a huge amount, but it does make you a little bulkier and feeds into the passive. If you're building a lot of items that grant HP, such as Rylai's, Archangel, and Rod of Ages, which we'll talk about later, this can be a good item to boost your damage, as the passive can give you a good amount of AP. The burn is also really useful against high HP tanky champions that mages usually struggle against. Nashor's Tooth is an essential item for AP champions that center around auto-attacking. It grants some attack speed and gives your techs 20% AP scaling. This lets champions like Diana or Gwen amp up their auto attack damage despite not building any attack damage items. For champions that rely on auto attacks, this is necessary to build most games. But if you're in a situation where you can only get one rotation of your abilities off, and you don't survive long enough to get many auto attacks off, Nashor's quickly loses its value. Rabadon's Death Cap is the capstone mage item. It grants 120 AP and increases your AP by 35%. This is what you want to build after you already have a few items built in order to make the most use of the passive. It only grants AP, so if you need utility or defense, you should build something else first. Sometimes the best way to do more damage is not to build as much AP as possible. If the enemy has a lot of magic resist, building something like a Void Staff would be more efficient. If you can build the item late in the game though, it will give a huge boost to your champion's power. The last legendary item we have to talk about is Magi's Soul Stealer. To understand the item, we have to look at its component, Dark Seal. Dark Seal is a 350 gold purchase that grants you AP for getting kills. Every kill or assist you get gives you 2 or 1 stacks respectively, up to 10 maximum. Every stack gives you 4 ability power, but every time you die, you lose 5 stacks. Mage is the upgraded version of Darkseal. It carries over your stacks from Darkseal, and is really only worth buying if you already have a lot of stacks. Mage raises the stakes for the item. Kills grant 4 stacks and assists grant 2 now. The cap is raised to 25, and you get 5 ability power per stack. Having over 10 stacks gives 10% movement speed too. The risk is higher too though, as dying will cause you to lose 10 stacks now. Buy these items if you want to gamble on snowballing off of a lead. Mythic items are the key to any build, and mages actually have the most of any role, giving you a lot of options to work with. Crown of the Shattered Queen is the defensive option for mages. It gives you a passive effect called Safeguard on a 40-second cooldown. Safeguard gives you a barrier. When you take damage from a champion, the barrier reduces it, and any damage for the next 1.5 seconds by 75% before breaking. While it is active and for 3 seconds after it breaks, it also gives you a little extra AP. Crown is a really strong item versus enemy team comps that rely on bursting you, and champions such as assassins. Because you have 1.5 seconds of relative safety, it is very difficult for anyone to catch you off guard, and you will have time to respond with your own abilities. As a bonus, many players will ignore your barrier and use their entire combo on you while it is still active, giving you extra time to react, while they have to wait for cooldowns. Crown's weakness is similar to that of spell shields, like the one from Banshee's Veil. Taking damage before a fight or from poke or indirect fire will still cause your shield to break, wasting the defense and leaving you with less AP. I would advise avoiding this item unless you know that you're not in danger of having your shield wasted by someone who's not a threat. If you are worried, the other mythics are probably going to be more consistently reliable. Everfrost is a very unique item that gives your champion an extra CC ability. Activating Everfrost sends out ice in a cone in front of your champion. Everyone hit by the cone is slowed for 1 second. If the enemy is in the center of the cone, they will be rooted instead of slowed. This means that they will not be able to move or use any movement abilities, but they can still use attacks and non-movement abilities, so you still have to be a little careful. Everfrost is very versatile when it comes to usefulness. If you're playing a champion with a lot of CC, you can add Everfrost at the end of your combo to keep the enemy in place for an extra second. Some abilities such as Vygar's W have a cast time that gives the enemy an opportunity to dodge. Using Everfrost before using these kinds of abilities makes your odds of hitting or at least forcing a flash out of the enemy much higher. The other use for Everfrost is a defensive item. It will not save you from getting one shot out of nowhere like Crown would, but you can use it to peel for yourself or others, fending off enemies by thwarting their movement. It can give you time to run away, or if you're strong enough to blow them up. Rod of Ages is a somewhat complicated scaling item. It doesn't actually reach its full potential until 10 minutes after you purchase it. Every minute after your purchase, Rod of Ages gains additional health, mana, and AP. This stacks up to 10 times, and after you reach the 10th stack, you instantly gain a level. It also has a passive effect called Eternity. You gain a percentage of the damage you take as mana, and when you spend mana, you gain a percentage of your mana spent as HP, up to 20 per cast. Every 200 mana or health restored, you gain 3 seconds of movement speed boost. All of these effects are increased by 50% if you've already reached your 10th stack. Clearly there is a lot going on with this item, but the situations you will want to purchase it in are generally the same. If you can afford to wait for the scaling, and want extra survivability from the HP and healing, as well as a little extra mana, the item will serve you well. If you need more specific survivability options, then Crown or Everfrost may serve you better, and if you need to be pumping out damage, the other mythics might be better suited. Keep in mind that some champions such as Kassadin or Aurelion Sol value levels a lot, so they can get even more value out of the scaling from this item. Liandry's Anguish is the mage's answer to tanks and bulky enemies. Generally, mages rely on finishing the enemy in a rotation or two of their spells, so tanks can feel like draining the ocean with a sponge. Liandry's provides a healthy solution, giving you 12% bonus magic damage against enemies based on their bonus health. Your bonus damage will cap after the enemy has over 1250 bonus HP. Liandry's, also similar to Demonic Embrace, causes your abilities to burn the enemy over 4 seconds for a flat amount that scales off of your AP and an extra 1% of their max HP each second. This is our first offensive mythic, and is the best option if the enemy has a lot of high HP, difficult to burst targets. If your champion can deal consistent damage throughout a fight, and constantly apply the burn to multiple targets, the effectiveness of Liandry's increases a lot. Luden's Tempest is another offensive mythic. It is for champions who need a little more burst damage, or can get reliable poke on the enemy. Luden's causes your abilities to deal an extra 100 damage, plus 10% of your AP to the target, and up to 3 nearby enemies. Luden's pairs well with champions who want to burst down their target, and finish them in a combo or two. It has a short cooldown as well, of 10 seconds that is reduced if Luden's hits a champion. The cooldown makes it effective for long-ranged mages, who can poke enemies off cooldown, adding some extra power to each of their strikes. For champions who cannot get as consistent poke damage but really want to burst their targets, Night Harvester is the quintessential burst mythic. Damaging an enemy champion deals an additional 125 damage, plus 15% of your AP, and grants you 35% extra movement speed for 1.5 seconds. The cooldown of Night Harvester is different than Luden's, as it is unique for each enemy, with a cooldown of 30 seconds per champion. This means you cannot use Night Harvester to poke very well, but you can easily pull up multi-kills by applying the burst to multiple enemies in a row. If you would not be able to get more value from Luden's poke, or you are playing a champion centered around multi-target bursts in teamfights, such as Vlad, Night Harvester is a great offensive option. Hextech Protobelt offers mobility for mages. Its effect is much simpler than the other mythics. Activating Protobelt causes you to dash a short distance and fire missiles in an arc. These missiles do 125 damage, plus 15% AP, and grant you 30% movement speed towards enemy champions. This item is amazing for champions who need to catch up to enemies in order to pull off their combo. In situations where the enemy is always coming into you, or your champion already has a lot of dashes, this item becomes pretty redundant. However, in situations where the enemy is able to play safe and stay away from you, and you need the extra movement speed, it can become a game changer. The last mythic is Riftmaker. Riftmaker is great for extended fights and champions who need a little omnivamp. For each second you are in combat, you will deal 3% bonus damage up to 9%. After 3 seconds, the bonus damage becomes true damage. The item is primarily for fighter-type champions like Mordekaiser or Gwen who can safely take extended fights long enough to get the full use of the passive, while also gaining a lot of value from the base stats. Generally, for longer range or squishier champions, the other mythics will outperform, but for the champions who really need it like Gwen, it is an essential part of their build. That is all of the mage items. If you have questions, please leave a comment and I will answer. Otherwise, I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time.